Alright, we're going to go over some readings on the Tao of Jeet Kune, page number 17. If you guys have any reflections on any of the statements, please offer them. How can one respond to the totality with partial, fragmentary pattern? Mere repetition of rhythmic, calculated movements robs combat movement of its aliveness and isness, its reality.
Reflection.
Yes.
Combat is by its nature is fluid. So if one is to remain rigid in their movements and their mind, one would first defeat himself.
So mere repetition of the rhythmic, calculated movements robs combat movement of its aliveness and isness, its reality. It gets me to think about rhythmic, it gets me to think about like dancing and music. And I think dancing and music has its place. Like to me, a great martial artist is also a great dancer. But you gotta know where, you gotta know its place. You gotta know what's dancing and you gotta know what's combat. So you got dancers that are moving in rhythm. They always say somebody doesn't have good rhythm, they make fun of him because they'd be like, he can't dance. They make fun of that. So a person that's good at dancing, he has good rhythm. Now, I think some of the problems is when people, they integrate dance into martial arts and then they still call it martial arts, but then it's closer to dance. So rather than saying, oh, I'm a martial artist, it might be more applicable to call them a dancer if they're more focused on maybe crowd pleasing or just movement, more of a dancing movement. Combat, he's talking about, is not about being rhythmic, it's more about broken rhythm. And it's alive and spontaneous. So as you develop as a martial artist, I think it's great to have both. Like, be able to be alive and in the moment and in meditation defend yourself in the utmost efficiency. And once you're able to do that and you're confident and capable, then you can put your energy into becoming a great dancer as well. Because the dancing will help your combat, help increase your combat as well. They go hand in hand. So even Bruce Lee was they say he was like a cha-cha champion dancer. So he had rhythm, and that's partly what made him great at being a martial artist. But you gotta know the function of what you're doing, and don't mistaken dance movements to be combat training, And don't turn something simple and efficient in combat into something that's complex and inefficient by, putting your ego into it and, trying to make a performance out of it opposed to sticking to the core of what's efficient. You stick to the core of what's efficient. Look at the people that have firearms or police officers. When they're in danger, they gotta quickly draw the firearm, aim and shoot. It's not about anything flashy or doing flips and backflips and fancy kicks. It's just simple, basic, efficient. Combat, similar. When you're in danger, you just have to do what you need to do to defend yourself at that moment. It's not about flashiness or performances. Now, if you're at the dance club, you're at a party, there's music, and you want to have fun, okay, that's great. But know that what you're doing is not efficient combat. It's just a way of artfully expressing your creativities.
Would you mind reading that one again? I lost the connection a little bit.
Mere repetition of rhythmic, calculated movements robs combat movement of its aliveness and isness, its reality. Accumulation of forms, just one more modification of conditioning, becomes an anchor that holds and ties down. It leads only one way, down. So Bruce is always, we'll probably read it later on in this book, but he always mentions like the block of clay that a sculptor chips away at the clay in order to show the essence and the beauty of the sculpture. So there's like excess that needs to be chipped away at in order to see the beauty. And when he says accumulation of forms, the key, the science behind it is being able to figure out when is enough. It's like an empty room. Like if you fill up the room with a bunch of garbage, then it's no longer beautiful because it's just accumulation of too much stuff. But if it's just an empty room and there's absolutely nothing, like just nothing, you know, no couch, no bed, no decorations, nothing, then yes, the room is useful, but it's not going to be as useful than having certain things that you feel that are necessary, you know, for greater enjoyment of that space. Obviously, and you know, I could attest to this from my home, for example, having, you know, children and a wife. There's too much stuff in there, you know, stuff everywhere, and it gets aggravating. You're like, man, I gotta get rid of stuff, you know, and then you clutter everything up. So that's what he's talking about. Accumulation of forms is like clutter, like just too much forms, too many techniques becomes an anchor that holds and ties you down and leads nowhere but just down. So it's like you have too many techniques, too many forms. It's like a cluttered space. It's like you can't make good use of it anymore. So that balance is hard to find because it might be different for different people. But he's not being too specific because you need some type of form, some type of techniques in order to be scientifically efficient. But the limitation of how much, that's the thing that's evasive. It's something it's going to be hard to determine for everybody. But you got to determine that for yourself. As for me, I know real combat on the streets dealing with the firearms. So the most basic and simple is point and shoot when you're in danger. Like that's the most basic. It's not about the side kick, front kick, jab, cross hook, uppercut, arm bars, chokes, eye jabs. No, none of that. Point and shoot. You're in danger. That's the most basic. Now, what else are we going to do besides that? Because you're not going to point and shoot everybody just because they, you know, sweared at you or they stole your wallet. So what else are we going to add into there? For me, it might be knife fighting. Carry a knife with me. Next one. For others, it might be carrying a baton. For me, I don't really care to carry a baton. Some people don't have any weapons, no gun, no knife, no baton, and they just have to use their body. So now, what's the most basic and simple way to defend yourself? Maybe the jab and cross, front kick, side kick, hook kick, reverse hook kick, roundhouse kick. What are some things that are inefficient? Well, we could probably take away the jump and spin kick. Or maybe even the back side kick or the spinning back fist. I mean, we had to determine what we want to take away and what we want to retain. Okay? Think about that whole room situation as a metaphor. Like if you stepped into your room and like, all right, you can only choose 10 things to keep. Everything else you got to throw away. What are the 10 things you're going to keep? Most essential for you. You notice also like in Japanese Zen type of room arrangements or Feng Shui, especially with the Japanese Zen type of home decor, is very simple. They don't even have a bed. It's just like an empty room and just very minimal things. So I think that's a struggle. As you keep training in the martial arts, you might start adding a bunch of complex things into what you do, and then you get further and further away from what's actually effective and efficient for combat.
May I add a reflection?
Go ahead.
What you just brought up, based on just what you said from the Jeet Kune about how things weigh you down, this is more just a spiritual reflection. I remember years ago a coworker of mine, actually was an instructor, and he said, the rules don't get so hampered on all the rules. We have so many standard, quote-unquote, operating procedures. Like, they're all essentially guidelines. Like, you follow them the best you can, but you do what's appropriate when it's appropriate. And that kind of gets me to think with, martial arts and the Tao of Jeet Kune it's like, well, let the circumstance dictate what you do. Not necessarily you bring all of this plethora of stuff like, oh, well, I'm going to do a kick. And it's like you said, if somebody brings a gun, why would you even entertain kicking somebody? Like, it's just foolish. Like, you're going to kick them, you're about to lock down with a gun. Like, okay, good luck with that.
How's that working out for you?
But, I mean, it makes sense. Even, I remember reading a book from Nelson Mandela. He talked about oppression. He's like, well, the struggle is determined by the nature of the oppressor. So if you leave yourself open to whatever the situation is, you deal with it open-minded, not just totally rigid of, with forms or whatever. I mean, that was all I had for it.
I'll add something just from my own life. I mean, that's, first of all, Bruce is deep as hell. Because it's so, the simplicity in his teachings are just like mind-boggling, because it really makes you think. And I just kind of apply that to my everyday life in terms of this whole idea of efficiency. And I've noticed as I've gotten older, I'm much more in tune with this whole idea of working smarter, not harder, and how can I accomplish the same goal in the most direct, efficient, simple way and still get the same result. And that's real. I mean, I could apply it to so many things, but the first thing kind of popped into my head was my sound system at home, right? Just as far as like, I've always had like massive sound system, multiple speakers and components and like just blowing up the place. And I was, I had my setup, my nice new home, whatnot, and I looked up, like, what is all this shit I got in here? And I cleared all that shit out and just streamed. I got like 2 components now. and it sounds just as good. It looks nicer. It's more efficient. It uses less energy, and the clutter is gone. And it also kind of just frees up the space. It frees up how I feel about the space. So I really, really like that teaching, the lesson behind that. It's very, very practical.
For me, it also gets me to think about something that I think is really relevant to what we do. We're talking about efficiency. He's just talking about efficiency, but think about it like this. If we become too efficient when we're not supposed to be too efficient, there could be some problems. So think about efficiency, like people, they want to take the elevator. It's like the 10th floor, that's efficient. Just jump in the elevator, go on the 10th floor. Or the person that takes the stairs, right? It's not efficient, but you see there's a reason behind not being efficient at that moment because you want to get that exercise in, right? Driving a car is efficient. You're going 20 miles, driving there. What's not as efficient? Biking, right? But why do we bike opposed to drive? Because of the health benefits, right? So that's what I try to integrate into this type of training. We got to know what's efficient for combat, stick to the science, understand the science, and apply it. But when it comes to exercise, it's almost like the less efficient you become, the more effective the exercise is. Because you're working harder and harder to, and then that's what's considered a good workout. That's something that's not efficient. Okay, you're great, you're an efficient runner. Okay, you could run a mile in 5 minutes. All right, put on this 50-pound vest. Now run. Now see what happens. It's like now they can't run in 5 minutes. It takes them like 20 minutes. So it's like, exercise is almost like the opposite of the science of combat. When your life is in danger, you got to be as efficient as possible because, 1 millisecond can mean the difference between life and death, especially when it comes to firearms. Like just being unaware for a millisecond could just end your life right there, But when it comes to exercise, you see it all the time. People making all this money, famous actors, but then they're getting really out of shape because they get so used to having everybody do everything for them. Oh, you can mow my grass, you can cut my hair, you can clean my home. And then I'll watch people exercise on TV, I don't gotta do it myself. It's like they have everybody do everything for them, and then who suffers, they suffer. So a lot of times, and when it comes to employment, we're like, hey, I want to make more money for my time. So a lot of these jobs, they'll be like, all right, we'll give you $100,000 just to sit in that chair for 10 hours, you don't do nothing. And then the other job, they'll be like, okay, you gotta mow this grass, you gotta do this, you gotta do that, you gotta do, wait on people, and you make $20,000. A lot of times, the inefficient jobs are the ones that pay more or less, and then like the ones that pay more, you don't have to do as much. So then we have to seek outside ways of getting more active in order to protect our health. It's like, we gotta know where that balance is. I see a lot of relevancy with the fitness aspect. Like, learn how to work hard, and then when I have you guys do fitness training, for example, I have you guys work out super hard in the fitness. So then when you do sparring, you don't have to work as hard because you did all the fitness training that when you spar, it's nothing to you. It's like you don't even sweat. You're not in fear. You don't sweat. It's like nothing. It's just, this is easy. It's like jump roping for 10 minutes straight is harder than sparring against this person. So then when somebody's attacking you, it's just no big deal. You're completely efficient. You're not in fear. You got your cardio. You got your strength. You got everything because you've done all the hard work. So when it comes to sparring, no problem. So that's when you work hard, it makes you more efficient in the combat. The combat is essential to know the science because you're talking about survival. We're not just talking about dancing. Because, dancing, your life is not on the line. You could just dance till you get tired and then stop, But when you're fighting for your life, somebody's trying to choke you, kill you, stab you, shoot you, you gotta be on point. You gotta conserve your energy, and you gotta know when to use it, when not to use it. It's essential, right? So, any other reflections on that?
The first part, I like a lot. I didn't want to go deep into it. I just want to listen to what everybody else had to say. But you can't come to, what is it, totality with partiality? Is that what the first line said?
How can one respond to the totality with partial, fragmentary pattern?
Okay. Well, the pattern part didn't really speak to me that much. But how can you respond to totality with partiality? That caught my ear. It's just like awareness, like people are sleeping. Like how do you, like life in general, you have to be aware of everything at every moment. At one moment you're sleeping, like in sparring, it's like that's the moment you get hit.
Yeah.
Reflection.
Yeah.
For me, that statement of attacking totality with fragmentation is the essence of guerrilla warfare. How do you defeat a big, solid army with fragmented forces? And you got to be very, very fluid and very in and out, in and out. You don't win. There's no fight to win, but you win the war. Just by being fragmented, constantly fluid, and you can defeat a larger force over time. Kind of like coming in with, I guess, a knife, and just making a lot of cuts and waiting till your enemy bleeds out rather than going for the big one-shot kill. Or you just have to stand back and let them fade away.
It's interesting that, because what you said, I could see, I could read the statement differently, just on what you said alone, and then what he said, I could see it in that side too. It's just interesting to me. It's kind of like those image that has actually two images. You look at it one way, it's one image. Look at it the other way, it's another image. Neither of them are false. It's just that it's actually two images. So that's interesting.
I'm about to bring a third. I don't know, maybe it's just the way I think or just see life. When I'm hearing these, I'm not even thinking about combat. I'm just thinking about like life in general, like how these things apply. How do you, because that, even that one too, in anything, in any aspect of life, how you come in half-ass? I mean, that's kind of where that's it's a bull. You're going to come with it. Don't be coming, one foot in, one foot out.
Oh man, because there's absolute truth in what you're saying, but this because you guys can't see it, this is actually in the form of a question. It says, how can one respond to the totality with partial fragmentary pattern? So it's almost like he's asking a question. So then he's like asking, okay, how could you, and then that's how he kind of approached it. How can you do it fragment? Like how can you still survive being fragmented? So it's almost like saying, say somebody has no choice, like he was born with no arms, and then somebody's attacking him. Well, how you're fragmented. How are you gonna survive the situation with no arms, this dangerous encounter? How do you do it? And then it's almost like he came up with a solution. Well, this is how you could do it. Like you don't have to go in for the kill right away. You could slice them up until they bleed out. Or like you're fighting somebody bigger, and then you kind of like use your endurance to your advantage. Just keep hitting and moving until you just can't move anymore. Boom, then you just end it, And then what you're saying too, like how could you go in there not fully in it? Because obviously there's that aspect as well. It's just interesting because almost like all these teachings, and that's the way of the Tao, it's like it's not choosing either or. Like the symbol of the yin yang, you're supposed to see both sides and understand both. And I think this is some of the hardest stuff to understand because our mind wants to choose this over that. And we're like, oh, Bruce Lee's saying this. Okay, we're on the bandwagon. Next thing you know, he says something completely opposite. Like, oh no, I'm not in there anymore. Because I mean, that's the nature of the way these teachings are. It's just so contradicting, you know. And then you're like, what is he trying to say? And then you gotta see both, like how it can be applied in different situations. It's like so fluid. Just think about water. You could boil water, right? And it's like burning you. But then all water also turns into solid ice that you can't even break it. It's just, and Bruce Lee's always talking about be like water. So then it's like, you gotta see how truth is, how it's just fluid, and then how to apply the teachings to whatever situation that you're in that moment, you know?
So like adapting to is that how you're interpreting that? Like adapting, like water adapts to whatever comes at it. You know, if it's cold, then it'll make adaptation. If it's heat, it'll adjust accordingly.
Yeah, because I mean, reading this, literally I haven't read this probably over 15 years. Coming back to this now, I could see a deeper truth. Because Bruce, during his time, just imagine this, because I talked about this the other day. He's in China, for example, and he's watching all these monks, shaved heads, wearing the same robe. They're all doing these patternized, fixed forms. And he's like, no, we got to switch this up, modernize this. He's more like Western. He wanted to be unique and different, so he brought in this Western, like more this individualization type feeling, right? And then like, no, I'm gonna have my hair, I'm gonna wear what I want. It's like comparing Under Armour clothing to like that traditional stuff, right? Comparing the AR-15 to that sword, for example, right? So like that's that time, his time. But then now we got a different time where everybody's got guns, everybody's got Under Armour, everybody's individual, a wrestler, a boxer, fighting for themselves. Now it's like we got to bring that tradition in to balance it out. The beauty of tradition, of working in the team as a family, in unity, doing things together. The beauty of the sword, compared to the AR-15, right? So during his time, he's saying this one thing because during his time, he's seeing something. He's like, no, we got to bring. I brought in an example the other day of like walking into the grocery store and during Bruce Lee's time, and there's 10,000 bananas, and then not even one apple. He's like, no, I'm gonna be that apple. I'm gonna be something different. But now it's switched. You go in the grocery store, 10,000 apples, not even one banana. Now you're like, you want to be the banana now. So it's like you just gotta adapt to the times, to the situations, and what he said back then is true back then. But now, especially living in America, things have changed. So many things have changed. So it's almost like the opposite becomes true at this time. That's what I see. It's very deep. The stuff, like I said, like the yin yang, can't choose one over the other, but you got to see the truth in both, and then just kind of adapt according to the situation. So, because I know how it is. Because when I first read it when I was younger. Oh, he's talking trash about forms. I'm gonna stop trashing forms now. Like he's just like, all right, like he says, all right, I'm gonna stop doing that. Like, like how come you don't practice forms no more? I was just Bruce Lee said. So, but it's just like now when I look at it from a different perspective, owning a school and everything and teaching people, I can see things really deeply, differently, It's different, But any other reflections on these?
I had one other thought that just came up around this fragmentation, or that being posed as a question, how do you adapt in water, all that. Even, because part of me too feels like however the Creator made us, we're whole. outside perception that somehow we're less than whole because, okay, you got 2 arms, I got 1. Maybe there's advantage versus disadvantage. But it still feels like, even with that question and how do you make the adaptation, to me it still feels like you got to bring all of who you are into that. You have to bring your total self, whether it's 1 leg less or 1 arm less or whatever it is. You still got to bring them 2 arms and 1 leg. You know, all of it, you know, right mind, body, spirit. And I don't know, that's kind of how I don't know. To me, partiality is a bit of a mindset. You can be whole if you find your wholeness within you, even if you're somehow disadvantaged because you don't have, I don't know, your lung capacity isn't the same, or you're not as smart. All right, then bring whatever smart you got to the table and let's roll. Bring whatever, I don't know. It's making me think a lot, man. That one's just got my mind.
Yeah, I mean, that one statement alone is deep, you know. Because, I mean, Osho would always bring up how the ego is like a wave in the ocean, and then consciousness, meditation is like the whole ocean. Like, how can you have one wave compete against the whole ocean? It's impossible. It's like the ego you just gotta let it go and then see the whole totality. So that when he talks about totality, it gets me to think about that ocean. Like, how can one respond to totality with the partial? It's like saying, you know, like there's the whole ocean's coming at you. Like there's a whole, I don't know what the hurricane or whatever. Like it's like trying to take you over, and then you got a squirt gun. It's like, let me stop this. It's like, no, like there's no way you're gonna stop it. Like you can't go against the total with the partial. You know, it's like I could see, you know, that part for sure. You know, but yeah. Yeah. All right. So, there's nothing else to say. We're gonna end it right there, and then let's work on the wooden dummy.